James Gunn's Superman isn't just a good superhero film. It is exactly the film we needed right now. Not just to kick off a new DC universe, but to remind people what a superhero is actually supposed to be on the big screen. Because we live in a time where cynicism is mistaken for intelligence, where kindness is seen as weakness, where being emotionally open, especially as a man, is something to be mocked, not respected. And what's fascinating is people are reacting to this Superman in exactly that way. You see it everywhere. He's too emotional, he's too weak, he's soft. But that reaction says more about us than it does about the character. Because what people are actually reacting to isn't his strength, it's his vulnerability. This version of Superman feels, he doubts himself, he cares deeply about the people who see him. He struggles with expectations.
People were going to die!
And yet somehow, sadly, that's controversial. But here's the thing. That is not a misunderstanding of this film. That is a misunderstanding of Superman as a character. Because Superman has never been interesting because he's invincible. He's interesting because he doesn't have to be good, but he chooses to be anyway because it is the right thing to do. To quote one of my favorite bands,
even though he could have smashed through any bank in the United States, well, he had the strength, but he would not.
Honestly, James Gunn, you need to have Superman song by the Crash Test Dummies and Man of Tomorrow. I beg you. Now, I've loved Superman for as long as I can remember. I grew up watching the Fletcher cartoons on a VHS with my dad. And like a lot of people, I grew up with the DCEU, the Snyder films. But even back then, something never really clicked for me. Because that version of Superman that I knew from the comics, especially stories like The Man of Steel by my boy John Byrne, wasn't just powerful. He was kind, he was sincere, he believed in people. And for a long time, it felt like that version of the character had been lost on screen adaptations. And I just want to make it clear that I don't actually hate Man of Steel or Zack Snyder's films or Henry Cavill. I just don't think that they're great Superman films. But what I love about what James Gunn does here is he doesn't try to modernize Superman by making him darker. He actually does the complete opposite. He takes everything that people say is outdated about the character, that compassion, that optimism, that emotional openness, and he makes that the point. He makes it the strength. Because again, when people say this Superman is weak, I don't understand what movie they're watching. This is a version of the character who hasn't lost a fight in the whole 3 years he has been publicly out as Superman. The only time he is beaten is by a clone of him literally engineered to be stronger than him. And even then, Superman fights for a full 3 hours before going down. My guy, that is not weakness. This is probably the strongest Superman we have seen yet. And I absolutely love how James Gunn establishes that, as well as him being one of the Supermen with the most emotional transparency since Christopher Reeve. He is strong in all sorts of different ways, not just physically. And I think that's why this version hits as hard as it does right now, because we, men especially like us, are constantly told online, culturally, everywhere, that being emotionally open makes you somehow lesser, that you should bottle things up, that you should just man up, that vulnerability is something to hide. And this film just outright rejects that. It gives us a Superman who smiles, who worries, who loves deeply, who wants to do the right thing, not just because he has to, but because he believes in it.
There's more people being held prisoner in there. We gotta go get him.
And instead of diminishing him, that's what makes him powerful, because strength isn't the absence of emotion. Strength is feeling everything and still choosing responsibility. And that's what this Superman understands better than any other version we have had since Christopher Reeve. Not as a symbol of power, but as a symbol of what we could be if we all chose to just be better. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I talk about Superman quite a lot, especially the comics. I absolutely love them, because for me, Superman has never been about a power fantasy or a god. I love the philosophy that's behind him, the idea of a being with godlike powers, choosing restraint, always pulling punches, an alien raised on a Kansas farm choosing humility, someone who could easily rule the world and choose to serve it instead. And it's all his choice. An ethical commitment made over and over again for years, made even more poignant in this film because of his perceived belief and understanding of his Kryptonian parents' message and what they wanted him to do on Earth. Because the message is damaged in transit when he came to Earth, so he only ever heard the first part, which, like in all the other films, they're all like, yeah, be a good man, save people. But in the second part of the message reveals them saying, have a harem, rule over everybody, have a villain arc. But because he is so good-natured, he never in a million years assumed that is what they would want for him. And again, he easily could have done that because of his power. And I really hope they don't retcon that and make it like Brainiac messed the meshes up, because it would really take away from that amazing scene with Pa Kent, which really is the heart of the philosophy behind this Superman.
I'd say what you wanted that message to mean says a whole lot more about you than what anyone meant for it to mean.
And that's exactly why Lex Luthor hates him. And I love his reasoning in this film too. Nicholas Hoult plays Lex brilliantly here, because this version of the character isn't just downright evil. He's ideological. He fears Superman
because his strength illuminates how weak we all really are.
That line tells you everything, because Lex understands power. He believes that power should be controlled, that strength must be governed, that beings with that kind of ability will inevitably dominate, because that's what he would do. And then Superman shows up and he chooses not to. And Lex cannot process that, because Superman represents something he cannot reduce to logic. Not control, not dominance, choice. And we get this amazing moment where Superman says he feels more human than alien. And it's absolutely perfect, because this film understands something really important. Humanity isn't your genes or your biology. It's your compassion for other human beings. And speaking of Lex with how he sees the world, James Gunn not only has the exposition for the kids watching, but shows that subtly with Ultraman as a character. Because there's this brilliant character moment near the end when Krypto takes out the cameras, Ultraman just stands there. The first few times I watched it, I thought, well, why is he not attacking? But on a recent rewatch, it clicked for me. Lex micromanages everything. He's a control freak. Ultraman never develops autonomy. He's a weapon waiting for instruction. So when the control disappears, so does his effectiveness. And it goes back to how Superman, on the other hand, operates from an internalized moral value. He doesn't need orders. He has that emotional strength and he draws his power from that. And that contrast is intentional. And that first punch where Clark doesn't hold back, I love the weight of it. Superman spends most of this film holding back because he is used to fighting weaker opponents. Here he finally lets loose and it feels earned. Now, another thing I loved about what James Gunn did with this movie was how he handled Krypto. I thought he would be cringe, to be honest. And yet he wasn't. He works really well emotionally and narratively in this movie. He's funny, sure, but he's also genuinely important to the story. He never feels like a gimmick. That whole bit at the end where Superman uses Krypto's disobedience to go after the cameras so that he can fight Ultraman was brilliant. And that same brilliance applies to the wider cast. Hawkgirl, Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, the hilariously entitled
Justice Gang.
They're all here, but they never outshadow Clark. They orbit his world instead of hijacking it. Mr. Terrific especially stands out. He's amazing in this. He's intelligent, he's capable, he's quietly loyal, he's exactly everything he should be. Even the smaller roles are handled with care and serve the plot. And Eve easily could have been a throwaway stereotype, but instead she's sharp, she's funny, there's more than meets the eye with Eve, and she's actually important to the plot. And there's a small detail that I love that really ties all this back to Superman himself. Guy Gardner starts the film saying,
I'm a Green Lantern, lady. That means I took a vow not to get involved in politics.
Oh, that's part of the vows.
It's implied, yeah.
An implied vow.
Every time there's something he doesn't want to do, he says it's part of some vow.
and then he does. He intervenes in the Buravian invasion of Jahanpur, which is a fantastic parallel to the Israeli genocide of Palestinians, and is absolutely hilarious when you consider that Buravia in DC Comics has been around longer than Israel. And that shift with Guy Gardner matters, because again, it's subtle, you blink and you miss it. It's one of those moments that rewards you for being locked in for the whole film. Clark's influence, his compassion for people, doesn't just save people, but it changes people. Even someone as arrogant and self-serving as Guy Gardner.
Bro, don't be such a wuss.
And that's the real genius of how this universe is built. It doesn't expand by cramming in characters. It expands through impact, through relationships, through the way that Superman affects the world around him. That is how you build a cinematic universe organically. Not by taking the focus away from your main character, but by making him the reason everything else matters. This film is also gorgeous, by the way. It's bright, it's colourful, it's alive. It feels just like a comic book. This is the most comic booky I have seen a movie yet. It looks like I've just opened a page. It doesn't feel ashamed of being a superhero movie. It embraces the iconography, the suit, the colours, the scale of it, all without irony. And I have waited years for that, because for a long time when I was growing up, superhero films felt that they were trying to distance themselves away from that identity. I mean, you look at those early 2000 Marvel films, those CW shows, they've got muted palettes, heavy tones, almost embarrassed by the idea of being larger than life. But this film leans into it, as it should. Now, the tone for this film is quite unique too. There are sequences in this film that are genuinely intense, like Russian roulette intense. There was a kid sitting a few seats down from me who was visibly shaken during parts of it. And honestly, good. Superhero stories should not condescend down to children. They should not talk down to them or sand off the darker edges. They should challenge them. They should show them that being good is not easy, that doing the right thing can be difficult, even frightening. I mean, that is why kids love Spider-Man or Iron Man and now Superman. James Gunn walks a really difficult tonal line here, and he absolutely nails it. I actually saw sort of parallels to the first Iron Man. I rewatched that recently and I was thinking, wow, this is quite dark for a kids movie, and yet look at the MCU. The kids love it. And this film never loses sight of what Superman is supposed to represent, not just visually, but emotionally. And I love how that brightness within this film also reflects who Superman is. Open, hopeful, present. And in a genre that has spent years chasing darkness, that is so refreshing. And when the credits rolled, we immediately wanted to watch this film again. That hasn't happened to me since The Batman. And here is the kicker. My fiance, who knows next to nothing about Superman, leaned over to me after it was finished and said, I might like Superman more than Batman. And I was like, well, hold the phone, let's not go that far. But for someone who genuinely dislikes superhero movies, she gave this a 10 out of 10. If you can win over someone who isn't predisposed to love the genre, you have done something special. And the thing that makes me happiest is the kids in this cinema. They are going to grow up with this version of Superman, the way that I grew up with the Fletcher cartoons, the way that others grew up with Christopher Reeve. And I wish other filmmakers put that level of thought into making superhero films, because there will always be a decent-sized contingent of youngsters who watch superhero films. There are a whole army of people now who grew up with the Snyder films, who vehemently hate anything that isn't Snyder's vision, and don't realize that those films were bastardized adaptations of those characters in the first place. And Snyder has unfortunately tarnished that, because Superman isn't just a character. He's an aspirational idea. And I wanted to briefly mention a moment that I adored but couldn't fit it in anywhere else in this video. But very early on, near the start of the film, where Superman takes flight for the first time, he is grinning like a little kid. And at the end, we see the home video footage of his dad lifting him up in the air when he was young. Suddenly, that grin carries everything. Every time he flies, he's that kid again. He feels like his dad holding him up. It's about a father lifting his son toward the sky, saying, you can fly. It's a beautiful moment. I love this movie. I have seen this movie 8 times now, because James Gunn just understands Superman at his core. Not just like as a god, but as a man who chooses goodness again and again. This feels like John Byrne's Superman to me. It redefines strength as empathy, reframes masculinity through vulnerability, and it embraces a sincerity in an age of cynicism. And it made me feel like a little kid sitting beside my dad again, smiling, hopeful. It was a very high 9 out of 10 for me. Not as good as The Batman, but if only James Gunn had put Starman in the end credits like we saw in social media posts hyping up the film for months before it came out, it could have been a masterpiece. Well, maybe not a masterpiece. It's not that good. It's a very, very good film. But I think like masterpiece I hold for like The Batman. You know, I don't think it's that level. But James Gunn needs to make up for that mistake of not putting Starman in by having Crash Test Dummies, Superman song, in Man of Tomorrow. Please, James, if you listen to it, I am begging you for that. Please. But anyway, I will see you on the next one, which will either be a Peacemaker Season 2 or a Creature Commandos Season 1 review. I want to do all the DCU stuff before Supergirl, because I'm really hyped for that. So I'm sorry to all my Star Trek fans. I will eventually get around to reviewing Enterprise. I'm nearly finished that. So I really cannot wait to finish that for you guys. But I am going to be doing shorts of Star Trek, so you are going to get Star Trek content, just not long form for a little while. But it's coming, and you are going to have lots of great content coming. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you all there. Live long and prosper. Thank you for watching my video.